Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today to talk about Measure 26259. It is it's seeking to ask voters to authorize a bond measure for Portland Public Schools. And if we could just have the people on the yes side do a quick introduction about who you are, of each of you, as well as kind of tell us why this is what the bond is about and why you think voters should approve it.
So why don't we have this, Dr. Armstrong lead? Go ahead.
Thank you. Kimberlee Armstrong. I am in my first year as superintendent here in Portland Public Schools. And I really appreciate the question. And I think what's really key is that I came into this role with 3 clear priorities: advancing reading, building trust and relationships across our city, and improving the physical condition of our learning spaces. Our measure is central to this vision because we cannot expect academic growth or community trust if our school buildings are unsafe or unfit for learning. So this is not about palaces or politics, it's about the people. Now, many of our schools are decades old, plagued by leaking roofs, failing heating systems, and outdated safety features. And our children and educators deserve better. So this bond is not about extravagance, right? It's about meeting basic standards and making sure that every student has a safe, healthy, and accessible environment to learn and grow. Now, some argue that now is not the time, or that Portland Public Schools should do more with less. But the facts are clear. Delaying any repairs only makes them more costly. It puts our children at risk, and it deepens inequities. And so other Oregon districts have invested in their schools, and Portland students should not be left behind. And then just lastly, I just want to say that this bond comes with strong oversight, regular public reporting, and a commitment to transparency. Dollars will be tracked, and community advisory committees will monitor progress every step of the way. And essentially, this is about putting our students first, making good on our commitment to their well-being and success. This measure supports our academic goals, strengthens community trust, and ensures that every one of our students can learn in a safe, modern school. That's all I
Great. Thank you very much. And actually, and I apologize, I didn't really ask this in a clear way. Can the other people who are on the side just kind of briefly introduce who you are so we all know? And maybe if we start with Eddie.
Okay.
Yeah, my name is Eddie Wang. I am the PPS board chair. And do you want each of us to also answer that question, or?
No, we'll probably get into more detail. I think just, get a sense of who everyone is first, and then we'll dive into things.
Awesome, thank you.
Susie?
I'll go next. So I am Susie Pontefract, and I am the parent of 2 PPS kids, Josh Pontefract, who's on the call, who is a senior at Cleveland, and my daughter, who is a 8th grader at Selwood Middle School. And I'm obviously passionate about it because Cleveland needs to be rebuilt, and I have all the reasons why. So thanks for letting me be here.
Josh, you want to introduce?
Yeah, my mom basically covered it. I'm a senior at Cleveland. I've been in PPS my whole life, so Dunaway, Selwood, then Cleveland. So here to give us students insight.
Hey, my name is Jeremy Wright.
Go ahead.
We've done work with Portland Public Schools and worked on every bond and levy since 2017. And I'm also a Portland Public School parent. I have a kindergarten and 3rd grader.
Great, thank you. And John, if you can just kind of introduce yourself and as well as Naomi, and then John, I suppose you can tell us a little bit why you think voters should vote against this bond measure.
Thank you. John Charles, President of Cascade Policy Institute, a nonpartisan public policy research organization. Naomi, you want to say something?
Sure. I'm attending just with Cascade Policy Institute as their external affairs manager, just to take notes and accompany John today.
So on the substance of this, I have been following the bond measure for several years. I've watched or attended every single meeting on it. I've testified probably 3 times. And I'm not a critic of of a bond idea per se. I'd like Portland Public Schools to succeed. I'd like Cleveland and Wells to get modernized, but this bond is unfortunately not the right mechanism. And I told the board that back in June when I testified, and here we are. But I'd like to go back, Helen. I watched your interview from 2020 with Julia Brim-Edwards and Wendy Johannes. And at the time, you were saying, how can we trust the board to not make the same mistakes that were made in 2017? And Julia assured you that, well, we have new mechanisms in place and we're going to have strong transparency and accountability. Yet here we are in 2025, and you've had a much bigger failure to deliver than 2017. And you have the Center for Black Student Excellence, $60 million. None of it's been spent. Nothing's been delivered. Jefferson High School, fully funded, $311 million. Now the budget is up to $491 million or something. It keeps fluctuating by the week. No shovel on the ground. In a related matter, the board went to the legislature in 2022 and demanded $120 million to move Harry Tubman Middle School for reasons never actually quite explained. And that hasn't happened. So you have 3 capital projects with over $500 million appropriated, and the board has nothing to show for it. It's kind of nervy, frankly, to come to voters and say you need more money for capital projects. And this failure has legal implications that I don't think the board is considering. A board member did ask the lawyer, Liz Large, for the board couple in December, what are the legal implications of us, referring this? And she said, and I'm quoting, from a legal perspective, the 3 sections, the 3 documents that represent the referral, represent the first step of what is the legal commitment the board is making for the use of those funds. Legal commitment. I don't sense any urgency by the management team. They're treating this like as a term paper that's 3 days late or something. No, you have general obligation bond money. You didn't do what you promised. That's a problem. Not only that, once they decided to go over budget on the Jefferson project in December of 2023 by having the kids stay on site, and they were told repeatedly by the staff that that was going to put them way over budget to the tune of $125 million. Well, ORS 294.100 says it is unlawful for any public official to expend public funds in excess of the amount or for any other purpose unauthorized by law. So once that was embedded in April of 2024, as the new budget is going to be $491 million, in my mind, every penny you've been spending for the last year on that project has been accruing illegally. What if the vote goes down here and you have a $460, $70, $80, $90 million project and you are authorized to spend $311? Again, I don't sense any urgency. So what I see is a failure of due diligence. There's never any due diligence on the Center for Black Student Excellence. That was just stuck in, which might, in contrast, when they've discussed recently having a Center for Native Student Excellence, the board appropriately, in my mind, said no. And Dr. Armstrong pointed out, well, our Native kids are scattered throughout the whole district, so how is one building going to be a unifying force? Exactly. Same argument applies to the CBSE, which no one's mentioning. There's been no due diligence on the climate policy, which is a $10 million premium per school to implement. And back in 2021, before the policy was even implemented, it was already known that PGE gets 63% of their electricity from fossil fuels. So going all electric just means you're switching where you're getting the fossil fuels from. And it was only 2 weeks ago when Dr. Armstrong sort of quietly in a public meeting raised the question of, well, there are no other electric schools in the country, and maybe we should consider doing something about that instead of $30 million premium. The next 3 speakers of the board totally ignored her comment. Then she brought it up again, and Gary Hollins actually jumped on that, and there was kind of a shouting match at the board. Well, I don't mind the shouting match, that's great, but it should have happened 3 years ago, before the policy was adopted. There's just a failure of due diligence. And one more example, they paid to have the Cornerstone report to look at why Beaverton and other districts are getting schools built for so much less, and that was a good idea. And then the vote comes on January 7th on the referral. I told them that night, you don't need to refer tonight. You have 7 more weeks. They didn't even have the Cornerstone report. They refer, and 2 weeks later they're discussing it, and several board members said, well, we should have had this report before we voted.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. They didn't do it.
I would like to
Sure.
dive into
Right.
some questions. And actually, first, I would like you to, and I'm not sure who wants to respond to this, if maybe Eddie wants to respond or someone, but if you can talk about just the board's performance in terms of overseeing the execution of the previous bonds. Do you think that that is, you've managed it credibly, and you know, that deserves voters' trust in going forward with this bond?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to talk about that. You know, first I want to kind of dispel some of the maybe misperceptions of what's going on. The kind of discussion during the board right now is not about what's going on the bond, but it's about how we kind of jumped the gun a little bit. We're trying to find ways to save costs, and the more costs that we save, that means the more money we can spend in terms of like seismic and HVAC upgrades for our elementary and middle schools. So in terms of transparency and accountability, you know, just also a reminder, the board is publicly elected. We're elected board by the people to oversee the district. So, you know, we don't answer to the district. Our job is to oversee it. And as part of the bond, we have multiple, we have multiple ways of kind of keeping an eye on how things are run. In fact, we have like 4 eyes on it. First is the board. You know, at the first level, we have 7 board members that oversee all bond projects, oversee contracts, contract approvals. We also, actually one of the few districts in Oregon actually have an internal auditor as well. So our internal auditor also oversees contracts, oversees the bond as well as that. And that internal auditor is hired by the board, and so therefore only answers to the board, not to the district. The third level of kind of oversight is that every bond requires a bond audit committee, and this is a publicly appointed committee of usually they're financial or audit experts from the committee that also oversee the bond as well. So that's the third kind of set of eyes over it. And then lastly, we also hire an outside audit firm that specializes in like big projects like this in terms of the bond. And we recently just had our 2020 audit completed back in November in the audit committee meeting. And the result for that, you know, I will also acknowledge, yes, the CBS or Center for Black Student Excellence was one of the flags, but other than that, it was actually a really clean audit. So it came out very, like I said, very successfully, very clean. A lot of the issues that were addressed. There was market improvement from the previous bonds as well. And we have all that, you know, on public records. All those documents are available to the public. You can take a look at it. But yeah.
Right. At the same time, you're going back asking for additional money for the Jefferson project. So can you, I mean, why did that get, did the board do its job in keeping that on schedule and keeping that moving forward so that you didn't have to go back for more money?
This is one of those things where there was a lot of public outreach and public input as well. And what the board was trying to do is trying to be responsive to the public needs, as well as the issue that, you know, Jefferson is a historically kind of serves a very historically underserved area, and being respectful to kind of the history behind all that as well. And so, yes, we're doing multiple things in terms of trying to reduce the cost in terms of, like, you know, as the Oregonian has reported before, going out for a rebid as well to try to, you know, because the situation has changed, to see if we can lower costs that way. And so, yeah, there have been multiple opportunities to try to reduce the cost at Jefferson.
Okay. I'm wondering if the yes side can talk about just what exactly is this bond going to do? Like, you know, I know that you've been looking at cost savings, but I didn't see a discussion yesterday about what the final package was. And, you know, so I would like to hear that, you know, laid out for us.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So 26259 finishes the modernizations that started back in 2012 with the Cleveland and Wells high schools, and we just discussed. provides funding as necessary for Jefferson. Does pretty significant health, safety, and seismic work. So there's a pot of money for those, as well as priority repairs. I think the district has a significant number backlog of repairs for everything. You think pipes, HVAC, windows, roofs, all of those things. And then as part of that would also be some more significant improvements around HVAC where necessary. And then for the first time, we're going to actually have some real improvements to elementary school and middle schools, and that money is going to be dedicated to doing things that will have more significant impact on the student environment. You know, our schools our elementary and middle schools, if it's too hot, cold, and old. 35 schools were built before 1930. 16 are over 100 years old. And we know that they really need some significant help. So there is going to be a part of the modernization fund will go towards that. So, you know, if you think about these and the projects in pots, you have your priority repairs and improvements, including health, safety, and seismic. You have your modernization, which includes Cleveland and Wells, as well as Jefferson, and the improvements at the elementary and middle school.
And how much to each?
Yeah, so give me a sec. I want to give you accurate numbers. So to each one, so for the rebuild and modernizations is 1.15 billion. For the and I do apologize. I did miss a category of educational materials, technology, and extracurricular activities. And that is critical. In 2020, the bond funded a significant overhaul for the first time in decades of curriculum in PPS, and this continues that, as well as technology and some athletic improvements in priority areas. That's 311 million. And updates and repairs to aging schools, as I talked about, those priority repairs is 200 million. And then there is a part of administration contingency for 166 million that adds up to 1.8 billion.
And so what portion of the cost of the reevaluation of the high school projects is going to go to elementary and middle schools?
Dr. Armstrong, do you want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, I think I want to make sure I understand your question. Any reduction, so please correct me if I'm not addressing what you ask. Any reductions that are made in our modernized high school bucket, if you will be put towards those priority improvements.
And what are those priority improvements? Like, how is that determined?
So those are all those things that have been flagged. As you know, we have a facilities report that puts our schools in categories that lists their condition. And so, you know, oftentimes we have roof that's in need of repair, that maintenance that's been deferred that we need to address. We have seismic, and you know, I know that oftentimes seismic is misunderstood, and there's code changes that happen, and every time that code changes, then guess what? Our buildings aren't meeting code, right? As we know more, we do more, right? And so really making sure that we're prioritizing the plan to make sure that all of our schools are safe, warm, and dry, and that our classrooms are supported.
Okay, so and let me ask, there isn't an estimate yet in terms of what the savings would be from taking a look at the high school projects?
Well, we're estimating about 200 million. We know we already have about 100 million in that bucket that will go over to that be at about 190 to make it 290 million. And we're anticipating at least another 100 million if it's true that we have between 30 to 35 million from each of the 3 projects that have been reduced in scope. And so that 100 million would be added to that 290. That would give us about 400 million to address some of the concerns that are coming up around seismic, roofs, the unreinforced masonry that is connected to, you know, seismic upgrades and roofs and things.
Okay, so I'm sorry, you're anticipating that there's possibly as much as 400 million available for elementary and middle schools.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is, but those aren't savings that have been identified yet.
Well, so we've been bringing forth every board meeting an update on how those reductions are going. And so the last update showed about, 30 million estimated. And so the total amount of those would go into that bucket, which then adds to the 290 that's already there, right? So when we look at the deferred maintenance, priority projects, we're at about 190 million. We have about a 100 million amount that's sitting in that modernized category where we see elementary and middle, and just really wanting to be clear that it's about updating and improving those projects. And then any other savings that we have will go towards that as well. And so that's how
Okay.
I get like an estimated 400 million.
And none of that money is going to go to things like I was looking at some of the old documents or some of the documents that the bond committee had looked at, the CBSE or the K-5 Learning Lab, which I'm not sure what the K-5 Learning Lab is.
Yeah, that was work that I think was happening prior to my arrival. So I can't speak to how those plans came to be, but I can tell you that they're no longer. I say that as I opened with, my priority has remained the same, and that's making sure that our learning spaces are safe, warm, and dry. And I also just wanted to underline and underscore something that I heard, and that's about making sure that that our buildings are improved. I think Jeremy said the average age of our buildings, we're talking about 16 that are over 100 years old and 35 built before 1930. Our average age is 76. So if you go to the National Center for Education Statistics, the last published report in 2020, the average age of schools across America was 44 years old. Our average age is 76. So let's talk about the three projects right now: Jefferson, Cleveland, and Ida B. Wells. If we look at the year that those three schools were built and we were to average those years, those three schools, the average of those years are 94, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
And
we're almost 100 years. So I want to lift that up because
I don't think I don't think anyone, at least, disputes that they're old, that they are in need of replacement. Certainly that has been well established. I think the question is, the amount of money that this is going to cost with some of the choices that the board has made. Just, it is worth asking or explaining kind of why. And just so that I'm clear, and because of the age of like all the other schools, that is why we want to know, are we maximizing money to go to elementary and middle schools? So none of those savings would go to the CBSE, would go to, I think I saw the Profit Center on one of the lists. So there's nothing, so none of the money would go there. Okay.
all of the money would go towards elementary, middle school priority projects. CBSE, we have funds for that. The relocation of the Profit Center that's a separate thing altogether, not using bond dollars. Any other project that we have out there that isn't about improving elementary and middle schools would not benefit from the bond dollars.
Great. And is the goal, like, will the bond ensure that every school has its heating and cooling needs met so that students can go to school when it's hot and not be sweltering?
Yes, I know the question, and I wish that I can give you an answer that is affirming that. I'm not at this time. What I can say is that we are actively putting together a 10-year plan and determining how much time it will take to make sure that all of our facilities across the city are able to heat when it's supposed to be warm and cool, or the ability to heat and ability to cool and to stay dry. So that isn't something that we think will be accomplished with this bond over the eight years. It is something that we're going to continue to work at and right size, right? And we talk about the 81 schools. We also know that we have over 100 facilities and our responsibility of being landowners.
And so over the next 8
And
years, that's not something that the district can commit to with this bond, that each school is going to be full enough for in, late August or in early June.
For all schools, not without estimated costs and an analysis of what it would take to accomplish that. Now, I'm excited about the 400 million, and I think the impact that it can bring to many of our sites across Portland is a wonderful opportunity for us. It's a needed opportunity, but without having quotes for every single one of our sites right now, it's hard to commit to that at this point. But there will be a plan for every single one of our schools. I can guarantee that. And then, Helen, if
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just
Dr.
wanted to
Armstrong.
respond because I appreciate John's opening remarks. I hope that I can call you John. And I appreciate you pulled up a couple of things. You talked about the Cornerstone report addressing costs. You talked about some of the policy regarding our climate justice. You talked about some of those considerations around the Native Center. And then you talked about just the responsibility of cost overruns with the CMGC. And I just want to acknowledge and appreciate that you lifted that up. Those decisions that were made this year, there's a new leadership team in place. And I will tell you with the questions, I am willing to lean in and ask the hard questions and make sure that I'm accountable for the funds that our community invests with us. And that's not just a first year thing, that's going to be for multiple years to come. So I know that we will be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars.
And let me ask, so, there were a few things that were outstanding questions from kind of looking through some of the bond documents. There was discussion about making sure that the bond would qualify for the Oregon School Capital Improvement Program matching funds. Does this bond, like in May, will that get the 12 million or so?
Jeremy, are you taking?
No. Yeah, I can take that. No, the Capital School Matching Plan, PPS already received that, so there's a certain time of awesome grant that you're not eligible to reapply. So it would be the next time. It would be the next bond. I think this is 6-year time because they want to give every school district an opportunity.
So waiting till November would not do anything.
No.
Okay. Also, there had been the discussion about possibly going in November. Is that, if this were to fail, is that a possibility that the district could come back and put a smaller or more defined bond measure on the November ballot?
From a campaign perspective, we have a very strong plan in place. Portland public voters have supported our bonds. We've passed every bond since 2012, and we fully hope and expect that the voters are going to pass this one. This one, one of the key aspects of this, and this one we invited the Cleveland folks here, is that, every time it's delayed, every time you pull it off the ballot, you don't pass it, key projects are delayed by a year, 2 years. And our students can't wait for that. So from a campaign perspective, we are definitely confident that and hopeful that voters are going to support it this May.
And from a leadership perspective, what I would say when we think about reconsidering a smaller bond, we'd have to ask the question, what are we willing to remove? And how might it impact our facilities and our facility planning long range?
Right. Well, I mean, like one of the things that has been raised is a question of enrollment. It's projected to decline quite a bit. There's the ed specs, I think, were developed at least 10 years ago. And so I guess, is it appropriate to actually reconsider, what is the correct trajectory to plan for?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I don't know if my board chair may have some comments, but it is clear that we are in a declining enrollment state. That's true across the state. That's true across the nation. And just because our numbers are down doesn't mean that they'll stay down, right? We know that we have new housing that's happening around us. There's some economic shifts that are occurring, and with that brings changing demographics. our schools continue to be community hubs, and we want to build for flexibility. And we know that when we have these buildings, despite the concerns and conversations around enrollment, they impact so many other things. And so our students deserve a facility that will remain for 100 years, as so many of our sites now are past that mark.
Right. But if they're built smaller or built for, you know, what the enrollment trends are suggesting at this point, then you could still have many of the things that you're talking about, or maybe even all of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah, if
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I think I'm gonna my board chair. I just want to say that, you know, the enrollment patterns are a predictable pattern based on birth rates. We also know that there are other things that happen in our world around us. And if you look at COVID, which, you know, just really quickly to say that some of those delays that John mentioned earlier was due to the pandemic and the ensuing impacts of that. But we're confident that the numbers that we receive aren't numbers that we're going to plan around 5-6 years out. But I want to pass to my board chair.
Yeah, I would like to, definitely address that. And before going into, just kind of want to, I've taught in, before I became chair, I was actually a teacher in PPS for many, many years, and now I'm also a parent in PPS. One of the things I want to really highlight is that, the PSU projections, they're just projections, and they've been wrong before. And not only that, but they're 5-year projections, and they very adamantly admitted that their confidence rating goes down after 5 years quite a bit. And they've been wrong before. And so the whole point is that we're not building schools for the next 5 years. We're building schools for the next 100 years. And there's a danger in building schools too small. This happened at Roosevelt, where the enrollment there was at 900 when Roosevelt was, before it got built. And then they built it for, I can't remember, I think it was like 1,200, but soon after had to incorporate additions. And it's far more expensive to keep adding versus building the right size. Second is also the educational impact. It's not a bad thing to have a school that's too big. It is really actually impactful and detrimental for student learning when schools are too small. I've taught in schools that were over enrolled before, and we have teachers on carts. You don't have time to set up your classrooms, which takes away instruction time. And so student learning really gets impacted when we build our schools too small. And then, lastly, as an example, right, in 1995, the PSU predicted, population projections predicted there was a decline. And in fact, in the next 5 years, Portland population almost doubled, right? And then same thing happened in 2008 during, the housing market crash, recession. It was the projection before that happened was a decline in enrollment, but the opposite actually happened. And so, we want to be very clear that, we're not building the schools for the next 5 years. We're building it for the next 100 years. And we have to kind of keep in mind that we can't anticipate what the future is going to look like. And so, those are kind of the comments, and I hopefully answered your question.
Is there previously there had been a discussion about bringing the high schools down to roughly, I think like 360 million or so. Is that still what you're looking at? I guess I got kind of confused in terms of where, there's the idea that there's going to be a total of about $400 million for elementary and middle school improvement. So I guess I'm wondering, does that mean that each of the schools are going to be, roughly a total of 360 million?
I think I can answer that because I know I started the conversation back in the summer when I arrived. And it was looking at comparisons across the United States and really wanting to ask questions, even though I know that there were already approved amounts back in June or actually, I think before June, back in maybe March or April, on the modernization plans for the high schools with the price already set. And the reason why I wanted that to be re-examined is because I wanted to make sure that A, we were being, fiscally responsible, and B, that we're doing everything we can to address some of the concerns that we have in other facilities. And so our board adopted a framework that really outlined some of the priorities priorities in which they wanted us to look at to reduce. You know, there were some other areas that came up for examination, but really thinking about the priorities, what's important to our City of Portland voters and community members and families, the framework is where the board ultimately landed. And so my team has been working to use that framework as a standard, and that's where the reductions are coming from. So using that framework to answer your question, Helen, making those reductions, it's not getting us to the 366 million. There's still some items on there that are costly. Some of them just thinking of what it means to build in the city of Portland. It's still leaving us in the lower 400 million mark. But I will also say that we're constantly committed to working on reducing that number. Even when our active build happens, it's the conversations we want to have is how are we saving funds? Because we know that every single one of those dollars are allocated to an elementary and middle school that can use it.
Do you think that there is a actually let me back up. You know, there was that discussion that John referenced regarding the all electric plan, and Director Hollins, you know, really kind of laid out in stark terms just, you know, what some of these choices are. You know, if you go all electric, if you're putting $30 million, you know, that is $30 million that you're not putting into, you know, the many other schools that have been rated for critical in terms of their, you know, their infrastructure. So is there a, and I guess this question would be for Eddie, is there any discussion about whether that is the right choice to make, and as well as, you know, LEED Gold certification, for instance?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm happy to answer that. A lot of discussion around electrification, remember we have to compare, you know, 30 million maybe, you know, if you substitute for something else, it may not be necessarily a $30 million savings. But the other thing about it is, you know, as part of our climate policy, we actually had a lot of student engagement on our climate policy. And one of the biggest things that the students really pushed for was electrification. One of that is also because of future proofing. As you know, the future of gas is kind of in question. We also know that there's kind of growing scientific body of evidence about the harmful effects of gas and combustion in general, and the proximity towards that. And so, you know, we're looking at health outcomes as well in the future. You know, there's links to there's been a lot of recent studies that came out about how lung cancer among non-smokers has actually been increasing, and a lot of that has been associated, you know, correlated, you know, we don't know about causation yet, with burning of fossil fuels, you know, including natural gas. And so, and then the other thing about electrification is that there's, you know, in terms of when we look at the industry numbers out there with, you know, businesses in the business world with their big buildings and things like that, electrifications tends to, you know, the pattern is that electrification is a bigger upfront cost, but over time it tends to save money. Now that you know, save money doesn't get realized till maybe 10 years out, but remember, these are 100-year buildings, right? And so it may be more of an upfront cost, but it could be potentially a savings in the future. And then plus, you know, how do you put a price on the potential health benefits as well? And not only that, but, you know, kind of addressing in the future, one thing about electrification is that it allows more, you know, different avenues for, you know, where you source that. You know, yeah, maybe today PG is burning 60% fossil fuels, but in the future that could change. Versus if you're stuck on natural gas, that's all you got, right? That's the only option you have. And so, yes, this was a big debate, and this was really well, you know, we had lots of conversations about this. And, you know, in the end, it's not as clean cut as, you know, one is obviously better than the other. But right now, the majority of the board feels that electrification in the long run is the better choice.
I'm wondering, can we call our student into this conversation? Because I'd love to hear from Josh.
Sure.
I know this isn't my meeting, but I wanted
No, I was about to say that, Dr. Armstrong.
Yeah, I can kind of give my anecdote as a Cleveland student. I don't really know as much about the logistics clearly as you guys do, but my start of my senior year, I came in. I have my first periods, my student store class, and my first assignment was to clean up ceiling tiles that had fallen of the year. That was the first thing that I ever did as a senior, was get a broom out and throw away fallen ceiling really on the floor of my school. It happens all the time. Ceiling tiles fall everywhere in Cleveland. I know students that have been hit by them walking in the halls. I know of a parent that was hit by one while taking a tour of Cleveland. Another thing is the facilities for specifically baseball and sports aren't really there. For the girls softball team, their games are canceled and rescheduled constantly because the boys get priority, meaning that their schedule is really not known, and it makes it difficult on the players. I have friends that have found needles on their baseball field because it's at Powell Park. They don't actually have a good facility to use. And that the girls for soccer have to practice super late because we only have that one field that's a couple blocks away. So they don't actually get to have the same practice time as the boys. Thirdly, a lot of my friends from elementary school, about 70% of them didn't go to Cleveland, largely because of the facilities available to them. The school building wasn't good enough, as good as the private schools that are in the area. The sports facilities weren't as good. And so a lot of my friends just didn't go to Cleveland for that reason, because the building and the facilities are too old and they're not good enough. Finally, I don't think it's fair that when my school is too hot, I don't get to go to school, but a kid that goes to a remodeled school does. So my school got canceled because it was too hot. We didn't have the AC. The facility just wasn't there. My friends at Grant had a full day of school that day. I missed out on learning and educational hours that other kids don't have to. I've been in classrooms that are so small and get so hot, there wasn't enough chairs that could fit in the room. Kids were sitting on the floor in my classroom. It was over 90 degrees in that classroom. That same year in winter, it was around 40. So I went from sweating a lot in a 94-degree classroom, we took the temperature, to being in a classroom where I'm wearing a full puffer jacket and gloves because of how cold it is. The temperature sustainability of the building just isn't up to par anymore. And that's one of the main reasons that it needs to kind of be fixed up. And really, it's just not fair, and it's not equitable, and or really sustainable, I mean, with these issues. So I think that this kind of needs to get done if it could. Thank you.
Thank you. No, 100%. Cleveland is absolutely in need of a new building. I don't think you're going to get much disagreement. Our concern is, some of the same things that you talked about: falling ceiling tiles, really hot classrooms, really cold classrooms are unfortunately, throughout the district. And, with this huge bond where the district can't go back to voters for another 8 years, or isn't expecting to go back to voters for another 8 years, that's a lot of time that you're asking for families to never see that kind of relief for their own school. So, I mean, I appreciate all of this and just kind of the cuts you're making and the reasons that you're looking at all electric, or is mass timber, is that still part of the Cleveland plan? Does anyone know?
That's potentially looking at that's one of the things that we're looking at in terms of saving costs. Because one of the things about mass timber versus concrete and steel, yes, the carbon footprint of concrete and steel is a little higher, but it's a one-time deal instead of something that's ongoing, such as electrification versus gas.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Now, Lynn, could I just answer on that? The hot, cold, and old kind of question.
Sure.
Dr. Armstrong talked about $400 million investment. That is almost as big as the first bond in 2012, right? So this is a significant amount of money and opportunity to put into schools. Will it touch every single brand new HVAC in every single elementary, middle school? I don't think the district isn't prepared to answer that, commit to that. But there's also opportunity we saw with the PSEF funds that are coming through for the Title I schools, and that's going to have a value added in terms of doing HVAC at some of these schools that would be funded through PSEF funds that came out. If you remember, the city council voted that last year. So there's going to be a combination here, not just that the district is working to bring in additional funds from other spaces to value add and add more opportunity to fix up every elementary and middle school with at least the hot, cold, and old.
Is the campaign able, I'm wondering, is the campaign able to say publicly, because, you know, again, I actually looked at the meeting yesterday to see discussion, because it, you know, on the April 8th meeting, they said there will be another report on the 22nd. Is the district able to say there will be 400 million available for elementary middle schools?
First, let me just say, Helen, the reason why we had a written report as opposed to the team come up is because there were no new updates since the 8th meeting. And so we anticipate that in May, we'll have some more information to share, but we didn't want to bring the team back up to say the same thing that they said in the meeting before that. I think that we are definitely committed to say that we have at the very least 300 million, I think, and that number is growing with reductions. There are some things that we don't know. I can tell you, under my leadership, I hope that anytime we go out for a bond for a school, we go out one time, right? And not that we need to run another bond to complete this school. I don't want that to be the case, right? We know that there's tariffs and other things. The more time that we spend working through this process, costs are going up, right? And so I want us to be able to afford Ida B. Wells in Cleveland and to make sure that we get this Jefferson project launched and off. So while I can say 300 million, that pot will continue to grow as those reductions are identified. And so, and with what we have identified now, it does put that number closest to 400. I think we can go as firmly on the record as we can to do that. And then the one other thing I just have to mention, I know we're almost out of time, but you know, for me, sometimes that elephant in the room is our financial deficit and the structural deficit that we're facing and the reductions that we're doing. We're not just making those reductions to be able to operate our schools at a high degree of efficiency and effectiveness. We also need to be able to carry some of the burdens of costs that we've asked our taxpayers to cover, right? Some of these things that we have to rely on our taxpayers for are things that we could benefit receiving from the state. And that's just not the case right now. And so we are actively doing our part. Now, obviously, we wouldn't be able to, you know, have enough saved in a bucket to renovate a whole high school, but to be able to address heating and cooling issues in a school, to be able to respond when emergencies happen, that our financial situation should be strong enough so that we can respond to those things. And that's going to take time. And that's my commitment to the Portland community.
Great, thank you. I did want to see if Laura or Julia and Betsy, and just to be clear, Julia and Betsy are on the new side of the wall. Laura is a member of the editorial board, to see if they have any other questions before we run out of time.
I do have questions. Is it okay if I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
So a quick lightning round. I'm wondering if anybody has given any thought to building smaller for now on the high schools, and you know, having plans be flexible enough to add in the future as needed. I know you all have talked about changing boundaries, but when I look at the PSU forecasts, and again, certainly they're subject to change, but I would say they could change either way. They could be better for PPS or they could be worse. We simply don't know. But looking at them for 2034, Roosevelt, McDaniel, and Grant high schools are all around 1,400 kids by that point, according to the PPS forecast, with Jefferson at 515. And that, I assume, is with no enrollment boundaries being withdrawn. So given that, has anybody thought about, or has any thought been given to building the high schools for, say, 1,000 students with the ability to expand in the future as needed, saving a lot of money for potentially desperately needed work in the elementary and middle schools?
That was a conversation that we had within the board, and the size of the school fit ed specs, and it wasn't part of the framework that the board adopted. And so we had no movement on that.
But those ed specs
Yeah.
are from 10 years and a different world ago.
Yeah, I mean, if I can add to that as well, I mean, there's some potential. I mean, you're right. There is some potential cost savings here for reducing size, but in kind of in the long run, it may not actually pencil out. I mean, it's a gamble, right? Because it's like 3D chess, we're predicting what the future is, what it's not, and also the additional costs of building later versus now, if it is additions, right? And part of the kind of driving motive in terms of this bond package was that this project started back in 2012, and the idea is that we wanted to start with the high schools because if we modernize all the high schools, it was seen as an equity piece in that every kid in PPS, no matter where their zip code is, will eventually end up in a modernized high school sometime in their career, and that is kind of the framework that we've been working around. Now, would it be right that some schools are smaller than others? That's another debate as well, right? And I would say no, that wouldn't be right. And also, it's one of those things where we I was going to say, yeah. So like, when we have, say, for example, Jefferson, which has, been historically, especially the community there, felt very underserved, and having them have a smaller school than everyone else, right? I mean, that's not only that, but if you look at the PSU projections, the Jefferson neighborhood, if you draw like a 2-mile radius of where their natural boundary would be, is one of the areas that's actually probably projected to decline the least of all the neighborhoods.
Yeah, but we don't know that the people
Yeah.
who move there will be people with families. I mean, I guess sticking with Jefferson for a moment, I'd like to ask whether there's been, I was at the meeting at SCI, I understood why the Jefferson community balked at going to Marshall. I'm wondering if there's been any thought given to putting those kids at Benson during construction, because my understanding is that keeping them on site during construction is also a significant cost driver.
think
And
we
there's room at Benson.
Yeah, Benson, we are raising the cap for the incoming 9th grade class, and we'll continue to do so over time until we have that building as close to capacity as we're able to get it. What I will say is we explored all options. I speak for the team prior to me, as many of these decisions predates me. And I can just say that our plan moving forward, keeping Jefferson students on campus and building around and changing the location of the building, we feel is the best decision for where we're at right now. And our goal to be able to save costs is to break ground and start, demoing and building as soon as possible for that site and save some costs with construction time. But at this point, yeah, no plans to relocate.
Given the enrollment forecasts and the 120 million or so that's sitting there for Harriet Tubman Middle School, what about making Harriet Tubman and Jefferson a 6 through 12 school, which is a model that's successfully used in neighboring districts like Beaverton, for example?
Well, that creates an option. I think that creates an option in any of our spaces. If it were to be 20 years from now that there's this massive decline, which I hope not, because I believe in Portland and I want it to be a destination city. But that aside, should there be some massive decline in our city and our high schools that are the most modern or under enrolled, I am sure that the leadership, because I don't know where I'll be in 20 years, hopefully retired somewhere, I am sure that the consideration that leadership will make is to be able to use those facilities that aren't 80, 90, 100 years old to house students, right? That's that flexibility that I talked about and really wanting to make sure that we're building, right? Just like good city planners, they're thinking 50, 60, 70 years ahead. And that's the mindset that we have right now in this process, coming in on a bus that's already been moving.
And Dr. Armstrong, I'm curious about whether you personally work to try to find an alternate location for Cleveland High School. The problems for that location have been really well documented. I know that the Kroger folks had said, we're not interested in giving you our headquarters, but that was a year or so ago that happened. Have you made any overtures to try to find other places for Cleveland?
This year, the team has, and in my last update, there was no facility that was large enough within that Cleveland service area that would be able to house a comprehensive high school. And so that's why we're where we're at right now with Cleveland in its original site.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, great. Then I think, and actually, John, let me ask you. You were saying that you're not necessarily opposed to any bond. Is that correct?
Correct.
So
I'll offer you a plan B if you want.
yeah,
Which, from the standpoint of the editorial board, I'll tell you what I told the school board on the 7th. I told them this last summer. The current bond is too big, too vague, too much debt service rather. I think it's going to fail. What I would do if I were them, and what I think you can endorse, is they could go out for a much smaller bond in November. It could be referred in, say, August, with just very simple things. Enough money for Cleveland and Wells modernization. Both of those could be for roughly combined about $700 million. Seek specific voter approval to reallocate the 60 million from the Center for Life Student Excellence. Just admit that that's a failure to launch. It's not going to happen. I mean, they need voter approval to spend it on something else. Use that 60 million to take care of the athletic field improvements, including the Grant Bowl fiasco. And that's it. Call it good. All this other curriculum technology stuff, no, just get that out of the bond. It's all too murky. It's barely even legal. If you put something in November for Wells and Cleveland and some athletic fields for about $800 million, and that's it. I think parents are not going to leave those two schools behind. I think voters would approve that by 70%, and I would support it.
and so you wouldn't address any of the issues at the other middle schools and the middle schools and the elementary schools. Look, or additional funds for Jefferson.
Well, Jefferson was fully funded in 2020. The deal's a deal. The board caused the problem. They have to clean it up. They got their money. But I go back to the 2012 financial plan of the board, which was, well, we're going to do relatively smallish bond measures every 5 years. But that was abandoned when they went to 1.2 billion in 2020, and now they're up to 1.8 billion. They're incurring massive amounts of interest that's going to be cannibalizing the general fund, already is. And I say go small, stay small, get things passed, things you can actually explain to the voters. And I think your questions today that they've struggled answering is a problem. It reflects how vague this bond is. Go small, let people get a win out of it, and take care of those two schools and have some other bond measure in 4 or 5 years. So.
Great.
So you'd let the elementary and middle schools go for another 4 or 5 years, John. You wouldn't address the hot, cold safety issues that have been raised.
There's always more to be done than you can do. I just think that the current bond has morphed into this Frankensteinian thing that a lot of things in the bond, they're not even construction. The statutes are quite clear. You have to, and one of the board members said at one of the meetings, Patty Sullivan, well, I don't think curriculum and technology should even be in the bond. And the superintendent agreed with her, but then said, well, we don't have any money, so it has to go in the bond now. Well, the right time is to do something. It's always the right time to do the right thing. And the right time to do the right thing is to get technology and curriculum and non-construction things out of construction bonds.
Great, thank you. We are out of time, but I wanted to offer both of you guys or both sides a chance to sum up. John, did you have more that you wanted to say?
No, that's my summary. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And Dr. Armstrong or whoever wants to kind of do a wrap up for us.
Yeah, I don't want to steal anyone's glory, but I definitely had a couple of words to share.
If I could, I hate to, I would just, as a parent, just say a few things because I haven't had a chance to, if you don't mind, Dr. Armstrong, but I won't take up much time.
I will yield my time to you.
Well, no, I don't mean to do that, but I just, initially I came on this call, thinking, defending the fact that Cleveland really needs this. And it's morphed some into, do we need to do all this now? And it just seems to me, I mean, I've got kids in middle schools that are too hot. The schools aren't safe. You know, if the big one hits, we have a lot of schools that need those seismic upgrades now. And John said, you know, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. Now is the time. I mean, sure, we can kick the can down the road 5 years, but why? It has to happen. Why not do it now? And I don't think the bond is that vague. I think, you know, it's high schools. It's then going to, you know, and it's upgrades. And yeah, some of that's going to change a little bit as we all know. I mean, we've all upgraded our bathroom and costs change, you know, it's a bathroom. So this is just, you know, it's a huge project. And I think they've done I mean, I'm really impressed the amount of parent and community involvement that has gone into design in Cleveland, and, you know, asking parents to weigh in, asking students, asking the community, so it can really be you know, a place where the community gets better and all, you know, around the whole neighborhood. It's really been impressive to me. And so I'm frustrated in that, you know, now we're questioning it. Now we're going to kick Cleveland and Ida B down the road again, because now all of a sudden other things are more important, when, you know, I don't believe that's the case. You know, these schools are important, but, you know, the upgrades and the heating and cooling, why put that off? Why not just get that going now? That's like my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to point out, I put in the chat the link to the district's bond page. The costs are clearly laid out in there. The projects are laid out. So please use that as a resource to answer any questions you may have, or you can reach out to the district and myself. Go ahead, Dr. Armstrong.
Oh, I think Susie did a wonderful job closing for me. So I guess if I were to say a sentence, it's to remember the average age of our facilities in Portland, and not just for modernization, but when we think about the heating and cooling and the safety of our students. It is our responsibility as a large landowner to make sure that we are approaching the improvement of these facilities with care, with decisiveness, and being stewards of the funds that we have access to. And so super excited for this measure and available should there be any follow-up questions. But thank you especially to Susie and Josh for giving of your time to be here, and I think everyone else too.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everyone.
We really appreciate the conversation. It's great. I will definitely, I do have a couple follow-ups, so Jeremy, I'll connect with you, but thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and
Yes,
if I could really quick, I think just once again, really fast, like I said before, I've seen the infrastructure problems firsthand. It's really, from a student standpoint, not a good idea to push this down the road. I've been in hot elementary schools and middle schools my whole life. Postponing this is, from a student standpoint, if the goal is to kind of benefit the students, which I think the schooling system is, it is, in my opinion, not the right move. It's better to nip it in the bud and not let it kind of flourish into a bigger problem down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Josh.
All right. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.